and welcome back to Cameron Reads Comics. My name's Cameron. I don't just read comics, I love them. And today, I have probably the biggest poll I've ever gotten of all time. Legendary artist, Doc Shaner. Hi, Doc. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Cameron?
Uh, I'm great. I called my mom before this, and I described it as walking on sunshine. So before I even ask you any questions, I just need to let you know that I absolutely adore. You are probably on my Mount Rushmore of comic book artists. And as I was like going through your like Twitter and Instagram, I was looking for stuff. What would you want to talk about? What questions do I have? And I'm just like, there's no question, but all I just wanted to say was you're just so talented. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy. I told you I met you at WonderCon. Uh,
hmm
I told you that your take on the characters is like my definitive take. Every look that you give them, all the panels, the layouts, the color schemes, huge fan. So I just want to give you mad props.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you, Cameron. Thank you.
The least I could do, and I'll try and contain it. But I always have to gush
Sure.
before. um,
That's all right. That's all right.
so first first and foremost, like I just want to talk about how do you describe your style and what do you want people to see it as? Because I think people want to lump you in with the golden age, and I don't think that's the take. What do you think? What do you want it to be?
Sure. I mean, for me, it's at least in the doing of it, I don't think about style. Um, for me, it's all about what what I see in my head first off, when I'm telling the story, or even with a cover. What do I see as my vision, so to speak. But and then it's all about just kind of trying to find a halfway point to what I see in my head and getting as close as I can. And for the most part, I'm pretty. The way I've always put it is naturalistic.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, there's a simplicity, of course. It's not. I'm not trying to be realistic.
yeah,
But I refer to it as naturalistic. It's largely how you see the world around you, except in superheroes, there's
yeah.
obviously larger than life elements to it.
Of
But
course.
for the most part, it is like you'd see walking around.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and especially like uh I think naturalistic is such a good way too. And I heard Dan Slott, or I read a tweet about him when he was plugging Spider-Man issue 801, like his last one with Marcos Martin, and he
hmm
said like there's just as many lines as needs to be there. And I think that's how I
Yeah.
describe. There's not like an overabundance. It's simple in that way, and I think there's such like a timeless. I think that's the word I'd lean towards more for your art. It's just so timeless. It'll work in any
Oh,
given period.
sure. Well, thank you. It's I try to be. I think an artist is only so much in control of that.
Yeah,
Which is why, yeah, I do wince a little at comparisons to Golden Age
yeah.
stuff and Silver Age stuff. Just for one thing, I think a lot of folks don't really know what that means when they say it. They
Yeah.
To them it just means old. Um,
Yeah.
and Because I'm sure if I said, "Well, which Golden Age artist are you thinking of?" and it's, well, I don't know.
No.
Um, um, but and I like a lot of that stuff too.
Of
It's not
course.
that I have any problem with being compared to that. But it's more so that I don't know that it's necessarily true, and I
Yeah.
don't want to sound like I'm taking credit for being a golden age artist.
I've told everyone. No, just kidding. I'm like he said he wants to be. So in that case though, because you draw my definitive DC universe, like again, I'm like I feel like just for context, I think it's so hard to make like Hal Jordan's Silver Age costume work, and I think you just make it work. Like there's a snap in there because genuinely, I recently read Green Lantern Earth One, and I was like, I think this is the take because Gabriel Hardman made it so
Oh yeah,
modern,
yeah,
and
yep.
I was like, I think if we're taking it in a direction, I think this is the right direction to take it. But then I see how you draw Hal, and I'm just like, wow, like no, there's a place for this too. And I just think that's so because I don't the translation, I don't know, in my brain. Anyways, maybe I'm mucking it all up. But
No. I think I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
um who do you like when you look at your flagship or your Mount Rushmore, who do you think is like drives your definitive DC universe?
It's hard to not just say that it's Jose Luis Garcia
Yeah,
Lopez,
of course.
um, because for so many of us for so long, he's defined the look of those characters to the broadest audience possible.
Yeah,
That's I always
absolutely.
say, like, like my parents have seen Jose Luis
Yeah,
Garcia Lopez's work. I
yeah,
can say, like, I know there's one artist you were aware of, even if you
yeah,
don't know his name. I know you've seen his stuff because it's
absolutely.
everywhere.
Absolutely.
Um, so it's hard to not just say that. And for the most part, and I'm a huge fan of his work.
Of course.
And he's an idol of mine. So yeah, it's hard not to immediately go to that. But of course, my first real introduction to the DC universe as a whole, as the entire tapestry of it, was Darwin.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
And so it's hard to, even though that, obviously that the New Frontier is locked into such a specific time,
course.
and that's not necessarily how I see the DC universe now. I see it as much more modern than that, or
Yeah.
even more spanning a wider time than just
Yeah.
that specific couple
Of
of
course.
years that New Frontier takes place in. But of course, yeah, of course, it's kind of like I always hear people say this about like Doctor Who and stuff. It's like, whoever you came in with,
Yeah.
that's your person. So it's hard to not just say Darwin as well.
Yeah. And actually that brings me to one of my next questions. And
Mhm,
I because I see your style and I see Darwin's style and even Chris Somney to a point.
mhm.
Again with the color palettes and everything you guys have going on stylistically. Uh Number one, also I think that those three are just you are one of the three are just amazing. But I noticed on your Twitter you started collecting like multiple pieces of Chris Somney art. How did that start
Oh
coming? Because
yeah.
I love him. He was half the reason I even bought Firepower with Kirkman
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
his Daredevil run with Mark Wade, like all that stuff.
It's
My
a classic.
jam. What
Yep.
what brought that to your attention?
I've known Chris for probably, oh boy, oh boy, coming up on 14 years or so. When I met Chris and his wife Laura, he was working on, I think it was The Mighty.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This was, before he'd really hit it off with Marvel, and we were part of a group together, with Mitch Gerrits and, oh my god, it's so many people, and it's been so long now. We were part of a sketch group,
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know you don't have a
where
Wikipedia page, by the way. I was like,
I know.
pull it.
Well, and it's been so long since we've had the group, but it was a bunch of us who, I think at the time, the biggest name in the bunch might have been either Chris or, oh god, I wish I could remember more of the names right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's
I
fine.
think it was like there were 14 or 15 of us, and it was a sketch group where we every week we had this email thread between us where one of us would pick a character or a theme or a topic, and we all drew something on that week.
Oh, no
Um,
way. That's
and
so
we
freaking cool.
we had a website for a long time where we would post it, and it did wonders for all of us. Like, whatever level, I had just started working. I hadn't really done many comics yet, but whatever level each of us were at, we all got bumped up like 4 levels because of this.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the way we worked and just our notoriety. Being part of that group was a huge deal. Anyway, that's
Especially with the names you're listing.
it was Chris, Mike Hawthorne, Declan Shalvey,
Oh my
Mitch,
gosh.
me. Who else?
That's
Uh,
that's
Fran-
like all time.
Fran- Francesco Francavilla. Tom Fowler. Who else? Good grief.
That's great. That's
It's
I think
there's at least like I'm gonna feel terrible later for forgetting the other 6 or 7 guys, but
that's even those are
um,
like all the success that you all have had over the last decade is just insane. Just to hear about that, like that's like oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no. So Chris, I just adore Chris's art. I think that guy
Oh yeah. Oh,
crushes.
so I just back when I met Chris way back in the day, he was like the first convention I met him at. He was charging $50 a sketch.
No way. Like,
Yeah, this was like I said, this was before Marvel and everything, and he's so damn fast that he didn't. It wasn't a big deal to him. And I was such a big fan with him, of his stuff immediately, that I think I got a Jonah Hex from him
oh wow.
back in the day. And ever since, I've just been kind of slowly. I've got it. It's not just the photo I posted the other day of my wall. I've got a huge collection of Chris's stuff in the drawers behind me.
Yeah.
That's just the stuff I've got on the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's one of my oldest friends in comics and just a really dear, sweet person. So
That's yeah, no, that's I have a list of artists that I want certain characters from. And
yeah, oh yeah,
I don't know if it's hard to choose with you also again because there's so many takes. That's why like it's the we met and I got a remark of Captain Marvel from you. And
yeah,
because
yep.
the convergence stuff and even you I don't know if you shared or it just got shared online. It was like I want to say your templates or how you're deciding the character looks before you even like start illustrating. But you did like it's a Billy and it's Captain Marvel next to him, and then like all
Oh
their
yeah,
like the CC Beck influence and stuff, and how you're translate. It was just so cool.
that's what I call the visual symbol of my own mental illness.
Yeah,
That's
I
that's
think you need.
I can't start a project without doing one of those. I have such a hard time concentrating on a specific look for a character until I've done one of those.
Oh, it's
So it's
the best.
you know,
Like,
thank you.
because you did those, and I think you did them also for because it was for I believe it's for Convergent Shazam because you did
Yeah.
one for Billy, Freddie, and Mary, and like
Yep.
I saw those and it's a good file size too, like on Google Images or whatever. Because like I got a hardy view of all those, and I think those are so cool. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy. Um,
Yeah.
which brings me to my next question. Who is your favorite character?
That's
DC or
that's
Marvel or
tough.
whatever. And
It's
if
it's that kind of thing where you got to break it
yeah,
down into categories because there's too many.
okay, you're on contract for DC. What's your DC character?
It's I mean, if I'm being honest, it's Superman.
That's
Um,
yeah.
uh, and there's a lot of characters who I think come so close that they're on the same level, but it's undoubtedly it's Superman. Um,
And I'm so
but yeah,
glad to
it's
hear
there's
you
so
say
many.
that. I'm so glad to hear you say that because I feel like Batman has I love Batman as much as the next guy, but I'm like he's so overhyped. But I'm just
Yeah,
so glad to see someone who draws optimism so well chooses the hopeful DC hero. Like so,
it's I have a lot of fondness for Batman too.
of course, yeah,
I'm a kid of the '90s. It's that's not lost on me.
yeah,
But at some point, I remember as a kid people saying like you're either a Superman kid or a Batman kid,
yeah.
and I knew immediately. I was like, oh, I'm a Superman kid.
That's so funny. What do you think influenced that like choice the most? Was it the Bruce Timm Paul Dini animated series? Was it Christopher Reeve or was it something else? Dan Jurgens.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I wasn't a huge comic book reader
Mm.
back in the '90s. It was all through the cartoons
Oh wow.
for me. That's how I got my superhero fix. Was
Yeah, same.
almost 99% through the cartoons. So yeah, I mean, and that's the reason I liked that era of Batman. I liked the Superman cartoon.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
watched the old black and white George Reeves
Oh,
show with
oh,
my dad
really?
as a kid. Yeah, because they would play reruns on Nick at Night, I think.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Back then, yeah. So I'd watch that. And I loved that show.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
you
cool.
know, even the I didn't see the 78 movie until I think until college.
Oh, wow.
But you know, it's a little. I think the funny thing about comics is you can have a favorite character that you've never read
Oh, yeah. No, you're
or
right.
seen anything in, or there's something about the character that draws you to them, you know, and you're like that something about them is speaking to you. You don't have to have read any story to know that.
Yeah.
Um, so and again, I say Superman is my favorite, but I like, and this is the problem when I talk to editors is I like all of them.
No, yeah.
There's very few characters I don't like or wouldn't want to work on. So it's tricky.
I gotta tell you, next time I see you, I'm probably gonna get because you drew again. I was on your Instagram and I couldn't even come up with a question, but I was like, hey, by the way, next time I see you, you drew the Thing, and I think the Thing is my favorite Marvel character. I just think,
Oh
and
yeah,
your
he's mine.
caption said that, yeah, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is why you. I'm like, I get it. Like I had at WonderCon as well. I had some extra money, or I just went over budget because Jim Chung was there, and I was like, oh, I
Oh
want a
yeah.
Jim Chung thing so
Oh
bad.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So I
his is awesome. Yeah.
yeah I bought a sketch variant from him or from like some other booth, and I was like for Fantastic Four #1, I was like, please just do that. And he's the nicest guy. I asked him to be on the
Yeah.
podcast, and he was like, I'm terrible at podcasts, and I'm like, that's good. Nothing ventured. um, okay, we were talking about I love your Superman, love your Shazam, obviously. But I also found on your Instagram one of my favorite things. You have like this intense love for Wildcat. And
Oh yeah.
I just want to give you a window to just why, like, what is it about Ted Grant? And because you also maybe him and Black Canary, I saw you have a Somni Wildcat. What
hmm
do you think it is about that character that you're just I love him?
Well, I'm glad we're talking about it on the tail of Ben Grimm because for me, Wildcat is DC's thing.
Yeah. Oh,
No, and
you're
obviously
so
there's,
right.
he's not, he doesn't have the whole man and monster
Of
dilemma
course.
that Ben Grimm does, but in terms of personality and heart and all the stuff I love about my favorite characters, it's Wildcat is in so many ways DC's Ben Grimm.
Yeah, that's so great and true and not a bridge I've ever made.
yeah, but even beyond that, I'm not for as much as folks like when I do old timey stuff. Um, and I try not to make too big a fuss of it because I realize that for a while there, maybe I was coming off a little too harsh, but I have no interest in the JSA as a team.
Yeah, that I feel like that'd be. I don't. I want you to, but I also don't want you to because I don't want you to like. I don't want to, give that narrative any more credibility because I'm also like, I think what you did with Adam Strange
hmm
is like one of the best takes. like, uh,
Oh, cool.
which transitions actually here. There's a great next question. Obviously, and this is the first time I ever saw something like this outside of anthology issues. Strange Adventures.
hmm
You're coming on the heels of probably one of the biggest DC stories in the last decade of Mr. Miracle, and then
hmm
Tom King and Mitch Gerards are gonna do what they do again, but
hmm
they bring you in. What was that process like collaborating on an issue by issue series?
It's it's funny. The thing is, I'd worked with Tom before Strange once, and I knew him through Mitch, of course. And I've known Mitch about as long as I've known Chris Somney. Mitch and I
That's
go way
yeah,
back. Um, and Mitch and I, even before Strange, we would talk, every day or so, just because in this job, when you spend so much time by yourself,
yeah,
you need buddies
yeah,
to check
yeah,
in with,
yeah.
just for your mental health. And Mitch and I would talk every now and then, and we'd say, well, what do you got coming up next, or we'd share pages with each other, what we're working on currently. So I asked, I said, so you're coming up on the end of Mr. Miracle. What are you looking at doing next? And when he pitched it to me, because I knew that he had met with Tom that weekend to talk about what they're going to do next. So Mitch is pitching me this Strange Adventure series, and he's like, "Yeah, we're going to do Adam Strange," and I went, "Oh, good for you." I wouldn't want to do
Yeah,
it.
it's like
And
such a hot take.
yeah, yeah, and but at the end of this long pitch Mitch has given me, he says, "And here's the best part: you're going to do half of it." And I
It
said,
doesn't, not a question.
"Okay, yeah." Um, but anyway, the collaboration was interesting because it was a lot of leading up to it. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of the costume design is something that Mitch and I decided on together.
Yeah.
That's so when that specific take on Adam's costume is something that Mitch and I did in collaboration. It's not really, I can see the parts that are me and the parts that are definitely Mitch, and how they work together. But in the first issue, we were kind of going back and forth about how we wanted to do this. But as the series went on, we talked to each other less.
Really?
And I could tell it was never a conscious decision. Neither of us ever said, "I'm not going to show you these pages that I'm working on." It just, as we went, we stopped showing each other as much, and we stopped showing Tom anything.
Good. Good.
Um,
That's cool.
and it became this like, as far we had this 3-panel grid worked out
Yeah.
so that we wouldn't have to worry about bumping into each other too much. But within that system, we developed a lot of freedom to kind of do whatever we wanted, and it really, like, the way they meshed together. It was Mitch was the one who had the final file. He
Yeah.
would compile everything for us. So it was interesting to see the way things would mesh there at the end. But I I know, even for me, like, near to the last 3 or 4 issues, I was doing stuff where I'd read the script and I go, "Yeah, we'll see if I do that this month."
Yeah.
Where I would, I knew, like, I would work around Tom's dialogue and what he needed to happen every issue.
Hmm.
But I was kind of like, I'll do my own thing here and see
Yeah.
what happens. It was a very interesting collaboration, and I haven't had that kind of freedom before or since. Um, so it was a really wild gig.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That sounds so cool. And especially like, you know, it's not something we've ever seen before, as or at least I've ever seen before as a fan, because it's so cool to see, to your point, your naturalistic style versus Mitch's such realistic style, and using
Hmm.
those as to frame up time periods, and especially the first page to the last page, I thought were so perfectly captured in those ways.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, I recently read it for the podcast, and it was just so fun to like. I'm like, oh man, it was so good. So that just seemed like, I was like, I had to ask, and I'm so glad to hear that little fun fact about um, the lack of communication at the end. And
yeah.
I always want to hear that you guys have the freedom, you're willing to be the freedom to be able to do what you want to do, because I feel like that's not something you always quite hear from the big two publishers.
It's something about working with Tom as well. I want to give due credit to Tom,
Yeah.
because I know people. I know it's a running thing of, like, how does Tom get all these artists? Because not even necessarily including myself. Like, Tom gets some of the best working today, and people are
Oh,
like,
it's
how does he do it? And the truth is, Tom gives us a lot of freedom. He knows how to write for us and to our strengths, and he gives us a lot of freedom to work with.
that's
Um, he
awesome.
he he makes us true collaborators, and that's why it's such a joy to work with him.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, especially like that he's getting the I think what, as a fan, from my perspective, my favorite thing that he does is he builds out the larger DC universe, because he treats
Hmm.
it such as that, like in the same way that you're saying Adam Strange isn't quite the one we want to take on. I don't know if Mr. Miracle was quite everyone's first pick, but they get the Tom King treatment, and it's beautiful. Like, my favorite issue of his run, or outside of his Batman run, was Batman Elmer Fudd. It's like,
Oh yeah,
this
yeah.
is amazing. Like, what?
Tom's perfect for that kind of oddball nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. But I love him for it. Him and my other I adore Mark Russell because like
Oh yeah,
what he did
yeah,
with the Snagglepuss and One Star Squadron. I'm like, this is insane what you're able to pull off.
yep.
Uh, but yeah, so and now this is a question just for me. Um,
Hmm.
I see a Power of Shazam #1 in a box behind you. I see a couple Captain Marvel
Yep.
statues.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have an affinity for the Marvel family? Or is that just
Oh
it?
yeah.
Like, do you choose to work on them? Because obviously you have new champion of Shazam, Convergence, and variant covers now. Or is that something you get assigned?
It's no, it's definitely a choice.
That's awesome.
It's a when I said, Superman's my favorite character, Captain Marvel could not there isn't a closer second
Yeah.
to Superman, and it's Cap. I had a friend of mine when I was first starting out in comics who put it to me. This is not something I was even aware of that I was doing, but a friend who pointed out to me, he said, "It's like you're trying out for Shazam every day."
Oh, wow.
Because of the stuff I was posting at the time. And I wasn't even really making a conscious decision to do it. It was just every time I was posting something, it was something Shazam related or with Cap. And at the time, there wasn't a ton with him.
Yeah.
This would have been prior to the Johns Frank reboot with the New
Yeah.
52. Um, and there just wasn't a ton of Shazam stuff going around. So
There's not.
I accidentally, though I love the character, I was accidentally making it so like, well, if we need a Shazam guy, who do we go to? Who does a lot of Shazam? Oh, Shaner. And that's kind of how Convergence came about. But no, I'm a huge fan of that world.
Yeah.
It's that two-parter with Jeff Parker was such a joy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we really like, and Jeff's a huge Shazam guy too. So we really worked hard to like leave it all on the table with that two-parter.
Yeah.
Which is why for a long time I was okay with the idea of not returning to it.
Yeah.
I got my fill with Cap, and most folks don't even get that. So I considered myself lucky. And then the book with Mary came up last year, and that turned out to be a good thing too. So
And like I gotta give you credit because you're the one. I didn't really read any Josie Campbell before that, and then but you were the one drawing Mary, and I also like I think one of the single best, I'd say under Barbara Gordon, probably my favorite female in the DC universe is Mary Marvel, who's just like the most underrated. And
oh
like
yeah,
Josie nailed that. Like I read it for you. I picked it up because of you, and I stayed on it because Josie just wrote the hell out of that book.
that was not. I'm gonna make it sound like I'm smarter than I am, but that was part of why I took the gig. And because initially after Strange Adventures that wrapped, I was talking to our editor, Brittany Holtzer, who was also a huge Shazam fan
Is it
and
great?
Mary fan, and she had asked me. She said, could you do a cover? We're developing a Mary series. Could you do a cover? And I said, well, who's drawing the book? She said, at the moment, nobody. And I said, well, I'm not doing anything.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um,
That's
and then
awesome.
especially once I found out, I didn't know Josie personally before Shazam, but I was aware of her work because she had worked so long in animation,
Mm.
and my kids watched everything Josie did.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I had this, and when I started talking to her, we immediately had this shorthand between us because she's very deep into the Shazam history, and especially Mary. So working with her was such a treat because she knows her stuff, and she really crafted a neat little story around Mary kind of inheriting this and making it her own. And I was such a fan of what she did
That's
with that
yeah,
book.
it's awesome. And I just for me it's always gonna be I love the family, but I'm like her, Freddie, and Billy are just
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's my family. So I love it. I
It's
mean,
tough to deny that. Yeah.
it's also too, I want to give you props. We talked about this for a second briefly. I interviewed Peter Krause, and
Yeah,
his to your point, you're like, okay, I'm just fine doing just Shazam, convergent Shazam. I'd be really happy with that. That's exactly what he said for when he took on Power of Shazam was
yeah,
if my only work at DC is just is being a Shazam guy, I can say I did this. And I'm like,
yeah.
that is so cool. Like if I was to I'm not really a writer, but if I was to ever like write a comic, I'm like that I'd love to touch that. I'd love to. I'm so excited to get your variant cover for Mark Waid's run. Who Mark Waid's my favorite writer, so that I'm
Yeah,
so excited for his take on that character.
good.
Um,
It's very good.
I know, and then Dan Mora too. Ridiculous, ridiculous.
Yeah.
I got like two more questions for you.
Okay.
Um, first one, if you have time to read comics, what is in your pull list? What's your favorite?
I Sure. I have not had a pull list per se in years.
Yeah,
Just because I don't get to go to the store as much as I used to.
yeah.
I used to be a weekly guy, up until I started really working in comics.
I yeah.
Um, so I don't have a weekly pull list or anything. And I don't really even have regular books that I'm picking up.
Oh wow.
But the last one that I made sure, like, when I knew it was on the stands, I would run out real quick and grab it was Cliff Chang's Catwoman Lonely City.
That I
Um,
need to pick up the hardcover for that. I got the first issue.
it's
That
gorgeous.
it is. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous, and it's also just like probably my favorite take on the character since Darwin Cook. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Yeah, I think I would agree.
I'm just it's not that everyone's writing Catwoman, everyone's doing great, some more than others, but I'm
Oh,
just
yeah,
like
totally. Totally.
Selena's big score was genuinely like I was like, oh, this
Yeah.
is it. That's like the single greatest.
Yeah.
And then I picked up the first issue of Lonely City, and I was like, oh, like because it's that series and then Rogues by Williamson were the two Black Label. Like that's exactly what I
Yeah.
want in a
Yep.
Black Label book. Like,
Yep. Exactly.
and so
Yep.
great. Okay, I'm sorry, I lied. I have three questions for you.
You're okay. No worries.
I'm just trying to milk your time for all it's worth. If if you could turn your the if you turn this audience onto one artist, creator, whatever, who is someone that you want other people to know about?
That's a toughie. I'm because I want it to be somebody either, young or doesn't I feel doesn't get the shine they deserve.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
No worries.
Yeah, this is the only one I may not have an answer for immediately. Um, I wish I had something more at hand,
No worries. When you
but
when you do, I don't have a huge following, but when you do, feel free to post it on your
yeah,
what's it, on your platforms.
maybe that's what I'll do. I know that's the thing that's so maddening about it is I
Yeah.
know I have a short list of names, but it's at the moment I'm coming up dry. But
That's okay. No worries, man. Well, I'm just glad people will hopefully listen to this interview and know more of who you are because literally, even just, I just need to give you your latest Titans #2 variant cover. Ridiculous.
oh,
Ridiculous. I'm just,
thanks.
I'm not going to slow down. I have one more question. So I
Yeah,
can milk this as long as I want.
go for it.
Last question for you. Uh, Obviously, I only want to talk to you about your work, but you're not working all the time. So what do you like to do outside of work? How do you unwind? What's your favorite free time activity?
These days it's because I have two kids. Um, it's usually something with the kids.
Good.
But it's usually either reading, catching up on reading, or I'll play video games with my boy.
When what
Um,
game?
it's he's we have a Switch, and he's crazy about everything that they have. He's um that's before I hopped in here with you. I ran home real quick and I played a half hour of Kirby
Oh
with
heck
him.
yeah. Heck
Um,
yeah.
he's because he'll be 7 soon, and he's all about everything Nintendo right now.
Did you take him
Um,
to the new Super Mario?
I did. We
Alrighty.
we took everybody last Thursday. Had a really good time. Um,
Good.
so
Awesome,
Yeah,
awesome.
I guess that's I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah.
It's I only recently started to really make sure I was taking time for myself and doing something that isn't comics.
Yeah.
And yeah, lately it just seems to be video games.
That's awesome. Good. I was like, I don't know, this is my unwind time. So it was like, okay, when after this, whatever, I'm gonna go play. I'm playing Batman Arkham Origins on just
Oh,
like
sure.
for the
Yeah.
for the fourth time. I'm like, this is great. Like, it was Joker the whole time, you know. But well,
Sure.
awesome. Thank you so much, Doc, for taking the time to come
Yeah.
on. I know I asked you previously. You're working on something, but you're not allowed to say yet. So, what can they pick up of yours as of late? Obviously, the new hardcover for Champion of Shazam came out or is coming out next week.
It's next. It's very soon. It's like in the next month. I
Awesome.
believe it's
Okay.
the first week of May.
Awesome.
But I just got my copies, so it's got to be soon.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Um, that and Strange
Strange
Adventures,
Adventures.
that should still be on the shelves, and there's a deluxe of that coming soon.
Oh, awesome. Hopefully, an
Um,
absolute edition.
I don't know if I want to see it blown up that big.
I do. I do. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on.
Yeah.
I'll plug. Where can they find you? Is it Act Doc Shaner?
Yeah, Twitter is at Doc Shaner, and I think Instagram and all the rest of that, you just search for Doc Shaner, you'll find me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was the ultimate treat. You're welcome back anytime if you can stomach coming back.
Ah,
I got you, brother. No, you're like
for
this
sure.
guy, too much of a ham. I've gotten it before. Cool. Well,
No,
thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, I'll see you again at another convention soon.
sounds good. Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah. All right. Take care.